Hi, I'm Tanya Malnitruk, the founder of the Autistic Strategies Network. I'd like to put together a few words on the Lancet Commission on the Future of Care and Clinical Research in Autism, published in the Lancet on the 6th of December 2021. The reason why I'm doing this is because the paper is being used, the report is being used to influence autism policy by governments and by provinces, by organizations. And the paper is problematic, and I'm hoping that what I say here will provide some impetus to autistic researchers and to disability rights academics to point out some of the problems in here to prevent some of these recommendations from going to policy. This is not going to be exhaustive and probably will also leave out some key points, but at least it'll get things started from my point of view. There have already been responses to it. So first of all, just to take a look at some of the people who were involved in writing this and their track record. And yes, you may say to me, but there was an autistic person who was involved there as well. And that would be Alex Plank. I'd like to come later back to why that's not sufficient. So some of the people some of the authors were connected with institutions which trace their legacy back to Levas, the guy who put ABA on the map. And we pervasively throughout this report see recommendations of ABA, that it's evidence-based, etc., etc., etc. We need to take a look at the work of researchers such as Kristen Botema-Beutel, whose name I might be mispronouncing, but I'm using the German and the Dutch pronunciations, which might be incorrect. But she has written, along with some co-authors, about the pervasive conflicts of interest in autism research, especially in early intervention research, of which ABA forms the bulk part that these authors are recommending, about the low quality of evidence in the approach to evidence-based therapy, etc., etc. So a lot of the claims which are being made in the Lancet paper about ABA as being this wonderful solution are not valid. And there's enough to cite about why it's not valid, and I will return to that as well. A key feature of the report is that it focuses particularly on autistic people who have high support needs. They characterize people with high support needs as people who cannot speak, who have a low IQ, and who need round-the-clock care. Now, that description, two of those descriptors, fit a number of my fellow activists, that they don't speak and that they do need to have somebody available to them around the clock for support. Some of them need support in terms of going to the bathroom. Some people need a communication partner. Some people might need help with eating, and some might need help with to prevent themselves from running away. And this is certainly not true of all of my fellow activists who speak, but there are a number of them who need that kind of support. The third characteristic which they propose should be a descriptor in what they call profound autism is a low IQ, or at least intellectual disability. I think that's what they said. That's a problematic descriptor because you can't measure intellectual disability in many non-speaking autistic people. The reason for that is that so many of them have problems with apraxia. This is an emergent bit of knowledge. And even if you did not agree that this was true, you at least need to take a look at, but what if apraxia was present? Would you be able to measure IQ given your normal tests? What is the IQ test for an apraxic person who has had no communication therapy and is unable to move their body? You would need to look then at comprehension, and you'd have to identify the exact correct place in the brain of that person. Tests which are only now being designed at Wilgar Lab in Cambridge. So you can't actually characterize this kind of person for whom you're targeting towards these behavioral interventions, if you actually can't measure the thing which you says qualifies them to have to go to this. So if we take a look at people who have emerged from that description, emerged meaning they were regarded as having high support needs, 24-hour care, unable to speak, and they were thought to have an intellectual disability. There are several who have come out of that who have said to us, I didn't have it, people underestimated me, and there are many others like me out there, and there are more and more and more people coming out who meet that description. In other words, take away the intellectual disability. And as they learn to control their bodies better, as they learn to communicate better, their care needs also reduce because they can express themselves better. They can have medical problems identified early on as opposed to, before the thing cascades into something bad. They can explain what helps them in terms of regulation and so on. So we have a problematic definition upon which these people purport to, the writers of this report, to describe what they think should happen to these people. And we have, on the other hand, an emerging number of people who say that this does not reflect what we are, and the group that you're trying to describe over here perhaps doesn't even exist, that there's not a large number of autistic people who have an intellectual disability, but certainly a large number of people who have suffered under the kinds of therapies which you have recommended. Now, the approach to recommend ABA for all of these people is based on a strong tradition in autism research to deny human rights, to not involve autistic people, the kinds of people who are being described in the report, as providing input into the report. So in other words, if somebody who has high support needs gains access to communication, those people are not consulted. It's no, you're an exception to the rule. No, you're an exception to the rule. Therefore, you should not be consulted. So who do we consult? We consult Alex Plank, who did not have the same kind of support needs as this Lancet Commission paper is trying to really focus on. We need to involve the kinds of people being spoken about when we do research. This is a requirement of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. Now, autism research traditionally doesn't feel anything for that. No involvement in, as we can see, we've got a tokenistic involvement happening here. When I say tokenistic, I'm referring to Einstein's ladder of participation. Research needs to be participatory in order for it to make sense. There are a few exceptions to this, in the sense that perhaps when you're doing biological research and you can't find a biologist who has this particular condition, then you can't involve them at all stages. But you can involve people at the stages of goals and at recommendations, because people who have, let's say you're doing cancer research and you don't find any cancer person with that particular kind of cancer, who can help you from a clinical perspective about cells and multiplication and so on, you can still be consulting with people. Would you accept this type of care? Would you accept this kind of intervention for your cancer? Weighing up the odds between the harm that it can do or the good that it can do you. So participatory research is really the answer, and this is not a participatory document, and yet it's going to go through into policy. So if I can just sum up some of those points that I hope that autistic academics will address. Number one, the kinds of people who are being spoken about over here were not involved, were pushed to the side. Number two, you cannot judge this criteria of intellectual disability if you don't have a proper scale for intellectual disability for people who may have movement disorders. Number three, ABA is problematic and has been rejected by the majority of autistic people who are writing about autism and about their ABA experiences. Non-consensual ABA, that is, because there are a few people who, with consent as adults, being able to set their own goals, have said that, oh yeah, this kind of thing was useful for me, or it didn't do me any harm anyway, but they had choices. So people without choices, um, uh, autistic activists on the whole, are really against that. This is not considered in here, almost as though, okay, yes, but you're high functioning, their language, you're high functioning, therefore you can't say anything about these people, these other people, these low function people, but we can. Why can you, but we can't? In other words, if autistic people who can express themselves in speech talk about trauma that they went through, do you think that the people who don't have speech are not going to have trauma, and you researchers are going to be the judge of this chasm between the two groups, that the one will experience it as traumatic but the other will get some kind of a benefit from it? We question the conflicts of interest of the research team, those who are affiliated with organizations who have a vested interest in ABA and who have partnerships with ABA providers, who have produced a lot of through the years. Not promotion is perhaps not the right word, but yes, okay, maybe I should add on promotion, Professor de Vries promotion of ABA, and who would perhaps not like a contradictory statement or something which absolutely annihilates what they've always claimed, to become the new view of autism. I recommend overall that this entire Lancet Commission be condemned for its non-exclusion, for its false premises, for its false claims of evidence-based approaches, for its misunderstanding of autism. But now it's up to the academics to go and write that document and to do the relevant citations and to provide the evidence of the kinds of things which I've said here.